The woman on the bench wasn't moving. Snow fell softly around her, covering her thin coat like a white blanket. Her hands were blue. Her lips were purple. People walked past her without stopping. They thought she was sleeping. But she wasn't sleeping. She was dying. And the man who could save her? He was the same man who put her there 3 days earlier. Grace wiped the giant mirror in the hallway until it sparkled like a diamond. Her arms hurt. Her back hurt. But she kept wiping. Everything in Mr. Whitaker's mansion had to be perfect. Not almost perfect. Not good enough. Perfect. Grace. The floor in the study has a smudge. She jumped. Mr. Whitaker stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at her like a king looking at a bug. His suit was black and clean. His shoes were so shiny she could see her reflection in them. "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir," Grace said quietly. She ran to the study. Her knees ached from scrubbing floors all morning. She found the smudge, tiny, almost invisible, and cleaned it. Her stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's breakfast. But there was no time for food. There was only time for work. Grace had been working in this mansion for 2 years. 2 long, cold years. The house was huge. 20 rooms, marble floors, gold decorations on the walls. It was the kind of house people dreamed about. But for Grace, it was a prison made of polish and silence. She slept in a tiny room next to the laundry. There was a bed, hard as a rock, and a small window that looked out at a brick wall. That was all. No pictures. No golems. No joy. But Grace didn't complain. She couldn't. She needed this job more than she needed air. Every week, she sent almost all her money home to her family. Her mother was sick. Very sick. The medicine cost more money than Grace had ever seen. And her little brother, Tommy, needed to stay in school. Without Grace's help, he would have to quit and work in the factories. He was only 10 years old. So Grace worked. She cleaned. She scrubbed. She polished. She made herself invisible. Mr. Charles Whitaker liked his workers to be invisible. He didn't want to see them. He didn't want to hear them. He just wanted his house clean, his food ready, and his life smooth. He was a millionaire. He owned 3 companies and 2 other houses. People respected him. People feared him. But nobody really knew him. He had built walls around his heart taller than his mansion. Every morning was the same. Grace woke up at 5 o'clock when the sky was still dark. She made Mr. Whitaker's coffee. Exactly 3 spoons of sugar, a splash of cream. She cooked his eggs. Exactly 4 minutes, not 1 second more. She set his newspaper on the table. Folded, not wrinkled. He never said thank you. He never even looked at her. To him, Grace was like a ghost. There, but not really there. The day everything broke. It was a Tuesday. The snow had started falling the night before, covering the city in white. Grace looked out the kitchen window and thought about Tommy. Did he have a warm coat? Was Mama taking her medicine? Grace. She turned. Mr. Whitaker stood in the doorway. His face was red. His eyes were angry. "Sir, the vase in the living room. It's broken." Grace's heart dropped into her stomach. The vase. The expensive blue vase from China. She had dusted it yesterday, very carefully. She had been so careful. I didn't break it, sir. I promise. I was very careful." "Are you calling me a liar?" His voice was ice. "No, sir. Maybe it fell? Maybe. Enough." He slammed his hand on the table. Grace jumped. "I've had enough of your carelessness. You're fired. Get out of my house." The world stopped spinning. "Fired?" "Sir, please," Grace whispered. Her voice shook. "Please. I need this job. My mother is sick. My brother." "I don't care about your problems," Mr. Whitaker said. His voice was calm now. Cold and calm. "I paid to do a job. You failed. Leave. Now." Tears filled Grace's eyes, but she blinked them away. She wouldn't cry in front of him. She wouldn't give him that. "You have 10 minutes to collect your things," he said. Then he walked away. Grace stood there, frozen. Her whole world was crumbling. Without this job, how would she pay for Mama's medicine? How would Tommy stay in school? What would happen to them? She went to her tiny room and packed her few belongings into an old bag, 3 dresses, a hairbrush, a picture of her family, the only thing that made her smile. 10 minutes later, she stood outside the mansion. The snow was falling harder now. The wind bit at her face. She had nowhere to go. Her apartment? She had lost it 2 months ago when the rent went up. She had been sleeping at the mansion, saving every penny for her family. She had no friends in the city, no family nearby, nothing. Grace walked and walked and walked. The city was full of people, but everyone rushed past her. Nobody saw her shivering. Nobody saw her crying. She was invisible here. 2. Night came. The temperature dropped. Grace's fingers went numb. She found a bench in a small park. It was covered in snow, but she was too tired to care. Too cold. Too broken. She sat down. Then she lay down. The snow kept falling. Just for a minute, she whispered to herself. I'll rest for just a minute. Her eyes closed. The snow covered her like a blanket, and Grace stopped shivering. Mr. Charles Whitaker couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his giant bed with silk sheets. The room was warm, too warm, but something felt wrong, like a stone sitting heavy in his chest. He kept thinking about the vase, the blue one from China. The truth was, his cat had knocked it over. He had seen it happen that morning. The cat jumped, the vase fell, it shattered. Simple. But when he saw Grace later, something mean had whispered in his head. Blame her. She's just a maid. It doesn't matter. So he did. He blamed her. He fired her. And he told himself it was fine. But now, lying in the dark, it didn't feel fine. It felt like poison in his stomach. Charles got out of bed. He put on his thick coat and his expensive boots. He didn't know why, but he needed to walk, to think, to breathe. He stepped outside. The cold hit him like a slap. Snow was everywhere, on the ground, on the trees, falling from the sky. The city looked like a snow globe. Charles walked down the quiet streets. His breath made little clouds in the air. Everything was peaceful, beautiful even. Then he saw the bench. At first, he thought it was just a pile of snow, but something made him look closer. He walked toward it, his boots crunching in the snow. That's when he saw the hand, a small, blue hand sticking out from under the white. "Oh, God," Charles whispered. He ran to the bench and brushed the snow away. Underneath was a woman. Her face was pale as paper. Her lips were purple. Her eyes were closed. And then he recognized her. Grace. No, 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 no. Charles dropped to his knees. Grace. Grace, wake up. She didn't move. She didn't open her eyes. She looked like a statue made of ice. Charles's hands shook as he felt for a pulse. There. Weak. So weak, but there. She was alive. Barely. Help. Charles screamed into the empty night. Someone help. But there was no one. The street was empty. Just him, Grace, and the falling snow. Charles pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. He called for an ambulance. Please hurry, he begged the operator. She's freezing. She's barely breathing. Please. Stay with her, sir. Keep her warm. We're coming. Charles took off his coat, his thick, warm, expensive coat, and wrapped it around Grace's frozen body. He rubbed her arms, trying to bring warmth back into them. I'm sorry, he whispered. Grace, I'm so sorry. Please don't die. Please. The minutes felt like hours. Charles held Grace close, sharing his body heat. He had never held another person like this. He had never felt so scared, so helpless. He looked at her face, really looked at it for the first time. She was young, maybe 25, younger than he thought. There were worry lines on her forehead, sadness in the curve of her mouth. Even now, who was she? What was her story? He had seen her every day for 2 years, but he knew nothing about her. Not her dreams, not her family, not even her favorite color. She had been invisible to him, and now she might die because of his cruelty. Finally, the ambulance arrived. Red lights flashed. Paramedics rushed out with a stretcher. She has severe hypothermia, one paramedic said, checking Grace's temperature. How long was she out here? I I don't know, Charles said. His voice cracked. I just found her. They lifted Grace onto the stretcher. She looked so small, so fragile. Are you family? A paramedic asked. Charles hesitated. Then he said, Yes, I'm responsible for her. That was true, wasn't it? He was responsible for all of this. Then come with us, sir. At the hospital. The hospital was bright and white and full of beeping machines. Charles sat in the waiting room, still wearing his snow-covered clothes. He was shivering now, but not from cold, from fear. A doctor came out. She looked tired. Are you with Grace Parker? She asked. Grace Parker. That was her full name. Charles had never known her last name. Yes, Charles said, standing up quickly. Is she alive? She's alive, the doctor said, but it was very close. Another hour and she would have died. Her body temperature was dangerously low. We're warming her slowly. She's unconscious but stable. Charles felt his knees go weak with relief. He sat down hard. Can I see her? He asked. The doctor studied him carefully. Are you really her family? No, Charles admitted. I was her employer. I fired her today. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. I fired her, and she had nowhere to go. So she ended up on that bench. This is my fault. The doctor's face hardened. I see. Please, Charles said, let me see her. I need to make this right. The doctor was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. Room 237. But she needs rest. Don't upset her. Charles walked down the long hallway. His heart pounded. What we say to her? Sorry? That word felt too small. Too empty. He pushed open the door to room 237. Grace lay in a hospital bed, covered in warm blankets. Machines beeped softly, and Ford dripped medicine into her arm. Her face still looked pale, but pinker than before. Alive. Charles pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. For a long time, he just watched her breathe. In and out, in and out. The most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Then he started to talk. Grace, I don't know if you can hear me, he said quietly, but I need to tell you something. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. His voice broke. I blamed you for breaking that vase. But you didn't break it. My cat did. Elite. I was cruel, and I didn't even think about what would happen to you after I fired you. I didn't think about you at all. Tears rolled down Charles's face. He didn't wipe them away. You worked for me for 2 years, and I never learned your name. I never asked about your life. I treated you like a machine, not a person. And that's not okay. That's not who I want to be. He looked at her peaceful face. When you wake up, and you will wake up, I'm going to do better. I promise you. I'm going to be better. Charles stayed in that chair all night. Nurses came and went. The sun rose, painting the room gold. And still, Charles sat with Grace, watching, waiting, hoping. For the first time in his life, Charles Whitaker understood what it meant to care about someone other than himself. And it changed everything. Grace's eyes opened slowly. Everything was blurry. White ceiling, bright lights, a beeping sound nearby. Where was she? She tried to sit up, but her body felt heavy, like she was made of lead. Easy, easy, a gentle voice said. A nurse appeared beside her. You're in the hospital. Sweetheart, you're safe now. Hospital? Grace's mind was foggy. The last thing she remembered was the bench, the cold, the snow falling on her face. How did I get here? Grace whispered. Her throat was dry. A man brought you in, the nurse said, adjusting Grace's blankets. You were suffering from severe hypothermia. You're very lucky to be alive. A man? What man? The nurse smiled. He's been here all night. Hasn't left your side. Do you want to see him? Before Grace could answer, the door opened, and there he was, Mr. Whitaker. Grace's heart jumped. Fear flooded through her body. Why was he here? Did he come to make sure she stayed away from his house? To threaten her? Charles saw the fear in her eyes, and it broke his heart. Grace, he said softly, staying by the door. I'm not here to hurt you. I promise. I need to talk to you. But only if you want to hear me. If you want me to leave, I'll leave right now. Grace stared at him. This didn't sound like the cold Mr. Whitaker she knew. His voice was different, softer. Saad, you can stay, she whispered. Charles walked slowly to the chair beside her bed. He looked terrible. His eyes were red, his clothes wrinkled, his hair messy. He looked like he had been crying. Grace, I need to tell you the truth, Charles began. His hands shook. You didn't break that vase. My cat knocked it over. I saw it happen. But I blamed you anyway because I was angry about something else, and I took it out on you. That was wrong. That was cruel. Grace's eyes went wide. He lied? I fired you for something you didn't do, Charles continued. His voice cracked. And I didn't care what happened to you after. I didn't ask if you had somewhere to go. I didn't ask if you'd be okay. I just wanted you gone. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Then last night, I found you on that bench, covered in snow, barely alive. And I realized something terrible. I almost killed you with my cruelty. Not with a weapon, but with coldness, with not caring, with treating you like you didn't matter. He looked directly into her eyes. But you do matter, Grace. You matter so much. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Grace didn't know what to say. She had spent 2 years invisible to this man. And now he was crying because of her? It felt like a dream. Why did you stay all night? Grace asked quietly. Because I was scared. Charles admitted. Scared you would die. Scared I would never get the chance to tell you how sorry I am. Scared I would have to live the rest of my life, knowing I killed someone just by not seeing them. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, My mother is sick. She needs medicine. My little brother needs to stay in school. That's why I needed a job so badly. That's why I sent all my money home. That's why I had nowhere to go. Charles closed his eyes. More pain. More guilt. I didn't know, he whispered. You never asked, Grace said. Not angry. Just honest. You're right, Charles said. I never asked, but I want to know now. Will you tell me about your family? And Grace did. She told him about her mama, who used to sing every morning but now could barely breathe. About Tommy, who loved books and dreamed of becoming a teacher. About their tiny house back in the village where she grew up. About how she came to the city to save them. Charles listened to every word. Really listened. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about someone else. I want to help, Charles said when she finished. Not because I feel guilty, well, I do feel guilty, but because it's the right thing to do. Your mother's medicine, your brother's school, a safe place for you to live. Let me help with all of it. Grace shook her head. I don't want charity, Mr. Whitaker. It's not charity, Charles said firmly. It's a correction. It's me fixing what I broke. And please, call me Charles. 2 weeks later, Grace stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment. A real apartment with a soft bed, a kitchen, and windows that looked at trees instead of brick walls. Her mama's medicine was paid for. Tommy was staying in school. They were safe. But Charles had done something else, too. Something bigger. Tonight was the night. Grace put on the simple blue dress Charles had bought her. She was nervous. So nervous her hands shook. A car came to pick her up. It drove through the snowy city to the mansion. But this time, Grace wasn't going through the back door. She was going through the front. The mansion's ballroom was full of people. Rich people in fancy clothes. They were all looking at her as she walked in. Charles stood at the front of the room. When he saw Grace, he smiled. A real warm smile. Everyone, Charles said, his voice filling the room. Thank you for coming tonight. I gathered you here because I need to tell you all something important. The room went quiet. 2 weeks ago, I did something terrible. I fired my maid, Grace Parker, for something she didn't do. I blamed her for my own mistakes. And because I didn't care about her as a person, she almost died. Gasps filled the room. People whispered. I found her freezing on a bench in the snow. Charles continued. And in that moment, I realized I had been living wrong. I had money, power, and success, but I had no heart. I had no kindness. I treated the people who worked for me like they were invisible. He looked at Grace. Grace taught me something important. Every person matters. Every person has a story. Every person deserves to be seen, respected, and cared for. Charles gestured for Grace to come stand beside him. She walked forward, her heart pounding. That's why, starting today, things are going to change, Charles announced. Grace is now the director of staff and employee welfare for all my properties. She will make sure that every person who works for me is treated with dignity, paid fairly, and never invisible. The room erupted in applause. Grace couldn't believe it. She wasn't a maid anymore. She was a leader. She had a voice. She had power to help others. Charles turned to her. Grace, I can never undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure it never happens again, to you or to anyone else. Will you help me do that? Grace smiled. For the first time in years, she felt warm from the inside out. Yes, she said, I will. 6 months later, the mansion was different now. It was still beautiful, still grand, but now it was warm. Charles had breakfast with his staff every Monday. He learned their names, their stories, their dreams. He paid them more. He gave them real breaks. He treated them like people. And Grace, she worked harder than ever. But now it was work that mattered. She created programs to help employees go to school. She set up a fund for medical emergencies. She made sure no one ever had to choose between their job and their family. Charles and Grace became friends. Real friends. They had coffee together and talked about how to make things better. They laughed. They planned. They built something good together. One snowy evening, Charles and Grace stood on the mansion steps, watching the snow fall. Do you ever think about that bench? Charles asked quietly. Every day, Grace said. Me too, Charles admitted. It was the worst night of my life, but also the night that saved my life, because it woke me up. Grace nodded. Sometimes the coldest moments teach us the warmest lessons. Charles smiled. You're wise, Grace Parker. And you're learning, Charles Whitaker, she said with a grin. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the snow transform the city into something beautiful. Grace was no longer invisible, and Charles was no longer cold. They had both found something precious, the power of seeing each other as human beings, worthy of love, respect, and dignity. And that changed everything. Did this story touch your heart? Grace's journey from invisible maid to respected leader shows us that everyone deserves to be seen and valued. If this story made you feel something, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Your support helps us create more content that matters. Thank you for watching, and remember, never let anyone make you feel invisible. You matter.